Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm doing a playthrough of the solo mode in Twilight Struggle Red Sea, and I'll follow up at the end of the video with my thoughts on the game. And disclaimer that I got a review copy of this one. And if you like the content on the One Stop Co-op Shop, consider supporting us through Patreon. You get early access to our videos and exclusive videos every month you can't see anywhere else, bonus top 10 lists and playthroughs. You can also listen to our podcast, or come and say hi on our Discord. So Twilight Struggle Red Sea is in some ways kind of like baby's first Twilight Struggle. It's not simplistic, but it's incredibly fast. I didn't even realize how fast it was when I requested it. In regular Twilight Struggle, I believe you go through 10 turns of gameplay, and this is 2. So I'm going to be able to do an entire playthrough very quickly. It's a very fast game. But the awesome thing is, this is the first time, at least I'm aware, that they've included an official solo mode for Twilight Struggle. But if you've never seen Twilight Struggle before, it tries to model at least one version, not necessarily fully historically accurate, of the Cold War between the US and the USSR. And Red Sea focuses on just a very small portion and specific historical moment in that conflict with the Horn of Africa and some of the Middle East. And there's a card-driven war game, so you're going to take turns playing cards. You can play them for their event. You can play them for the number up here in operation points. And operation points are generally used to try to modify the influence players hold in these countries on the board, because the more influence you have, the more you control. And then when the regions get scored, in this game just Africa and the Middle East, you get victory points, and whoever has the most victory points at the end wins, or you get an immediate win if you're ever 10 ahead of your opponent. And the big brain burner in Twilight Struggle is that some events are keyed to one side, like this one is just USSR, and some events can go to either side. And you'll often have cards for the other side in your hand, like if this was my card, the Dirk. Actually, it is. This is part of my initial hand. If I play this card, I have to resolve the event for the other side to get the points for myself. Whereas cards that are mixed or are for your side, you can play for either their operation points or their event. And again, Red Sea goes across 2 turns. Each turn is going to have a headline phase where we each resolve one event from our hand, and then 7 action rounds with that little tracker you can kind of see at the top there, where each of us will play 1 card. At the end of the 2 turns, again, we'll see who has the most victory points. And there are a bunch of different actions and things you can do, but I'll get to those as we play the game. So let's jump in with our first headline phase and see Twilight Struggle Red Sea. So at the beginning of each turn in the game, you're going to draw a 9-card hand. At first, all the cards come from the mid-war deck. In Twilight Red Sea, there's only mid-war and late war, whereas in the original Twilight Struggle, there were early war cards too. Additionally, the US is going to start with the Romanian Autonomy card, which is like a little bonus 10th card. If I don't use this, this is worth a victory point at the end of the game. If I do use it, I give it to the USSR, and it's going to be worth a victory point for them. The bot will never use the card as a card, so basically once I give it to them, it's going to stay with them. And this is actually a hand I'm very happy with. I only have 3, 3 event cards that are specifically for the USSR. And one of them, the Derg, is one of the most powerful ones for them to control Ethiopia, which is a really important country in this particular conflict. So I'm much happier with me having it than letting them do bad stuff with it. And I've also got some really powerful cards. My favorite one is a Victorious Leader. This card is crazy. And then Hero of the Crossing lets me get a card back from the discard pile. So I can potentially... Oh, no, that's right. When I play Victorious Leader for its event, it gets removed from the game. Darn, I was going to say maybe I could get a double play of it. Well, I could play it for its operations, use Hero of the Crossing to get it back, and then play it for its event, but it's already a 3. Okay, I'm getting too much into the weeds here. The important thing is that I need to pick 1 card to play for the headline phase, and only the card's event is going to be resolved. So one interesting one to consider is US Aid. It gives me 1 operation point to use, and then if played in the headline phase, I can go first in action rounds this turn, because usually the USSR always goes first. That's the 1 card that changes that. And why would I want to go first? There's a lot in the game that relies on adjacency of influence. So at the start of the game, I've got a little bit of influence in Saudi Arabia, a little bit of influence in Ethiopia. They've got a bit in South Yemen and Somalia. And a really important concept in the game is control. You'll see that in the upper right of each country, there's a number. That's its stability. And you need to have that much influence in the country to flip your influence marker from its white side to its colored side to show that you control that country right now. So I control Ethiopia, and USSR controls South Yemen because they are equal or exceeding the 1 stability. And you also need to beat your opponent's influence by that much. So like if the USSR had 1 in Ethiopia, even though we're both equal to or greater than the stability number, we need to exceed the other person by at least 1 as well. So yeah, that would take away my control. But like I was saying, there are a lot of things that rely on adjacency. So if I did use USAID and went first, I could potentially remove their influence in Somalia, and it would be a lot tougher for them to get back into Africa because they won't have anything that's directly connecting them there, except for Yemen leading into Djibouti right here with that little adjacency line. But I've actually got an alternate option that's going to do kind of the same thing. The Apollo-Soyuz test project. By the way, this is not a era of history that I'm super familiar with, so I'm probably going to pronounce some things wrong. So I advanced one space on the space race track, and the space race track was in the original Twilight Struggle as well. You get bonuses for progressing up it, and it's also a way to throw away one of the other side's cards per turn. So like I might use I don't know, the Derg or Soviets airlift Cubans on this track. But if I get it up one right at the start with this card, it gives me the power at the end of each headline phase to remove one influence from one country. So I can also wipe out Somalia's influence, and that seems like a great thing to do. So I'm going to play the Apollo-Soyuz test project. I don't resolve it yet because the USSR is also playing a card. And how that works for the bot is they're going to flip cards until they get one that is either a mixed nationality card or specifically for the USSR. And then they've got this chart of every event card that is for the USSR or mixed in the game. And there's a column that says play as a headline. So first you see if there's a Y there and then see if any of the special text applies. So this one, Indian Ocean ZOP, says no, you can't play in the headline. In fact, you would only play it in the action round if it's round 7 or 8. 8 is only with special cards. Usually there's only 7 action rounds. So when I flip a card that can't be played, I just draw again, and all these are going to get shuffled back in. Arab League, I know they're also not going to go for. It lets the players score 3 victory points if they control at least 3 of the following countries. And, South Yemen USSR does control, but that's only 1 of 3. So that one's also not playable. Anything that is just for me is clearly not playable. That is a US card. This looks like one they're going to love to play. Nasserism. Yeah, in fact, it is perfect for them. Look, yes, playable only as a headline or an action round 1, and if DEFCON is 3 or higher. And this is going to stay in play for the rest of the turn. And by the way, Twilight Struggle, kind of annoyingly to me, flops the terms turn and round from what I'm used to. Turn is the entire big unit of play in the game. There's only 2 turns total, and then there's 7 action rounds within the 2 turns. So don't let that be too confusing. But so they're going to play Nasserism, which will give them +1 to their coup attempts, which is one of the most powerful ways you can switch influence in the game. So they're very happy with that. These are going to get shuffled back in. So priority for cards to be resolved, you're going to start with the one that has the higher ops value, which is this one. If there's a tie, the US wins the tie. In this case, the cards are totally non-contradictory, so it doesn't really matter. Nasserism is just going to stick near the board to remind us that it's in play. And my card is just going to move me up on the space track. And now, because it's the end of the headline phase, I can remove 1 influence from 1 country, and as planned, we're wiping them out of Africa. Africa matters more in the first turn. Only the Africa scoring card is in play, and you can immediately win the game if you control both Ethiopia and Somalia, and I think a couple other countries. I forget the exact requirement. And just controlling more African countries. So like if I got control of Somalia right now, and then played the African scoring card, which is not in my hand sadly, then I would immediately win the game. But the Middle East will become very important in the second turn of the game and in final scoring, because you score both regions at the end of the game as well as when the cards are played. So that's the headline phase. My card is discarded. And we go into the first action round, which is going to start with a USSR play, because again, they start unless US aid was played. So let's see how this works for the bot. So the bot begins by flipping over the top card of the deck. And if it's a card that could be played for them as an event, it's going to go from left to right into a line of cards called the card line. If it was a US event only, it would go to the discard, although it would still technically be the card that the USSR played for that turn, and they would still get to use the ops value for things. But the big bonus the bot gets over a human player to balance things out is that they never resolve your events. Whereas if I played a card like this that was there for 3 ops points, they would get to resolve this event in their favor. All right, so we've got Arab League. You do always want to check if there's any special instructions, because some of the cards they'll say to shuffle right back in. This one is only playable if they would score 3 victory points, which we saw this card before, would mean they would have to have 3 of those countries controlled, and they don't. So this is just a 2 ops card right now. But what are they going to use it for? So here's the fun spreadsheet. Actually, there's 2 parts. This one's going to determine what they want to do, and this is going to determine where they do it. So first you're trying to figure out which column to look at, and then you go option by option and see which applies. So the first checkmark says USSR does not control a flashpoint country, or at least 3 countries in Africa, and Africa scoring is not in the discard pile. There's a few different types of countries that it's going to refer to for the AI. Flashpoint countries are Ethiopia and Somalia, these ones with the lightning bolts. And they matter because, like I said, the Africa scoring card gives you an instant victory if you control both of those and have more countries controlled in Africa than your opponent. So that's why the AI is really going to care a lot about those, at least until that Africa scoring card is in the discard and they know they don't have to deal with it anymore. Then another one's going to come up a lot is what's called battleground countries. Those are Kenya, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. You'll see they have a purple background in their name. Those are hugely important for the scoring cards. They're worth 1 victory point each when they're scored by themselves, and they also determine whether you get presence or domination or control and get, again, ton of points to win the game. And then the last thing the AI is going to talk about sometimes are what's called choke point countries. This is not in the regular game. This is just an AI term. And choke point countries are countries that are next to battleground countries where you don't have influence yet. So like Sudan is a choke point country for Egypt. Ethiopia and Somalia and Madagascar, which you can't see because it's down here, are choke point countries for Kenya. And Oman, Yemen, and South Yemen are check point countries for Saudi Arabia. Although right now they're not because I already have influence in Saudi Arabia. So basically these are countries that are adjacent to a battleground that will allow me to easily place influence in there because the USSR will try to cut me off from those and not let me get into Egypt, for example. So with all that preamble being said, we know this is true. So the first thing you're going to check is, will they play the leftmost event card in the card line? We already know that card is invalid, so we can skip all of these instructions. Let's move on. So instead, they will coup if a 4 result would remove all US influence from a flashpoint country. And this one's going to be true, but let me show you why. So performing a coup in the game is the fastest way to quickly seize control of a country, specifically countries with low stability like this one in Ethiopia. And how coups work is you roll a die, let's say they got like a 3, and then you add the ops value of the card you played for the action, so in this case a 5, and you pick a single country where your opponent has influence. So right now they can only coup in Saudi Arabia or Ethiopia. So you take the sum, 3 plus 2 in this case, you subtract double the stability. By the way, ignore this 3, that's only if a specific event is played, which it currently has not been. So 1 times 2 is 2, 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 minus 2 is 3. And those 3 points are spent first on a 1-to-1 basis to remove influence of your opponent, and then on a 1-to-1 basis to increase influence for yourself. So with this 3 plus 2 minus 2, 3 result, they would first wipe out my influence, and then boom, put 2 of their own in, which means they would now control Ethiopia, and I would have nothing in Africa. Now, for an alternate example to show why stability is so important, let's say they did the exact same roll and the exact same card in Saudi Arabia. 2 plus 3 is 5, minus 3 multiplied by 2 is 6, which would be 0, so they wouldn't change a single thing. Well, I guess it would be -1, but either way. Now, before we actually resolve this action, I need to talk about DEFCON. So if DEFCON goes to 1, that means the conflict has triggered thermonuclear war, boom, and y'all lose, so you don't want that. And in fact, the AI will never do an action that could potentially cause that to happen. And DEFCON is directly related to coups. If you coup in a battleground station, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, or Kenya, you automatically lower DEFCON 1. And once DEFCON is at 3 or 2, you can no longer do coups or what are called realignment rolls, I'll show you that in a second, in any of the Middle Eastern countries. And by the way, Egypt counts as both Middle Eastern and Africa, so it's super important. On the other hand, if you coup in a flashpoint country like Ethiopia, as the USSR is about to do, then you flip the top card of the deck. If it's a scoring card, a 1 or a 2, then you also lower DEFCON by 1. If it's a 3 or a 4, the card goes back to the bottom of the deck and does not lower DEFCON. But that's a much higher likelihood that DEFCON will get lowered, so the AI will never take that kind of action when the DEFCON's already at 2 because they know they could lose the game by doing so. All right, sorry for all the teaching breaks. There's going to be a few more during this video. But yeah, it says coup if a 4 result would remove all US influence from a flashpoint country. We saw that like just a 3 would easily wipe out Ethiopia's influence, and I think even a 2 would. And a 4 plus 2, 6 would only equal the doubled stability of Saudi Arabia, so it wouldn't wipe out my influence at all. So they are going to target Ethiopia with this action and do a coup. So here we go, and they only got a 2, but I think that's still going to be enough. So 2 plus 2 ups for the card is 4 minus the stability doubled, which is 2. It's going to wipe me out and put 1 influence of theirs in, which is enough to control because of a stability of 1. All right, so I can probably kick them back out of there, Although I will say, besides the Durg card that's in my hand, there's also another one, the Lion. I forget what the card's called, but there's a card that will basically destroy me in Ethiopia regardless. So I can fight back there, but honestly, Ethiopia is not the best place for me to go to a lot of the time. But what is really bad is that now I have no influence in Africa, just like they didn't before. By the way, this card is not discarded. This is important. Cards that are used for their event from the card line do get discarded or removed from the game if they have like oh god, I forgot they have Nasserism for +1 to coup rolls. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so cards that are used for ops by the AI are not removed from the game. Instead, they stay in the card line, basically threatening the potential use of this event later. So you become aware of events that are like kind of hanging over your head, sort of Damocles style. But yeah, so with Nasserism, they actually got a 3 on the roll, plus 2 ops is 5. So they get 3 total, which lets them go to a 2 there instead of a 1. And then we flip the top card of the deck to see if DEFCON is lowered, and indeed it is, because it was a 1, a 2, or a scoring card. This card is discarded, and DEFCON will degrade to 3. Which importantly means now there can be no coup actions in any of the Middle East, and there can be no realignment anywhere in the Middle East. Which is going to protect Saudi Arabia for me, make it tougher for me to get rid of South Yemen, but so it goes. One final point I can't forget is that after a coup, you increase your required military operations by the ops value of the coup card, which was 2. And at the end of each turn, you compare your military operations to the current DEFCON status. So right now it's 3, and the USSR has 2. If the turn suddenly ended right now because they are 1 short, they would lose 1 victory point. Although I would lose 3 victory points since I have no military operations at the moment. Okay, now we go to my action round. Let's talk about some options here. All right, so in terms of cards I might want to play for their event, Separatist is pretty awesome if they get a bunch of people somewhere, like, maybe I only have 2 in Ethiopia, but I could do this. The event adds sufficient influence in 1 non-battleground country, so Ethiopia as a flashpoint would count, to equal your opponent's influence. So I would just get 2 influence there for free, which is pretty darn good. And then looking at other ones, Romanian autonomy I don't want to play if I can help it, because again, it's worth a victory point at the end, and I want to give them a victory point. That's a 2-point swing. Hero of the Crossing is 3 ops, where I can get a card back from the discard, which is pretty darn good. Victorious Leaders may be my best card in the mid-war. I get to add 4 influence to countries, adjacent to countries that were USSR controlled at the start of the round, so before their turn, but adding no more than 2 influence per country. Now, it's countries that the USSR controlled at the start of the round, an action round being them playing a card and then me playing a card. So I could not do it next to Ethiopia this round, but next round I could put 2 in Kenya and 2 in Sudan to get me toward Egypt, which is great. I will probably do that. But yeah, not a good time to play it yet. The Ogaden War is an interesting card. It involves Somalia invading Ethiopia, and I could just turn all of the influence in Ethiopia into my influence. But you need to roll a 5 or 6, and there's only negative modifiers for that roll. That war is not supposed to be very winnable. So I'm just going to use that for 2 ops for sure. And US Aid is an event that doesn't apply anymore after the headline phase, so it's just a 2 card for me. And just to briefly look at other options, the Durg adds 2 USSR influence in Ethiopia, and then if Ethiopia is USSR controlled, its stability becomes 3 for the rest of the game, which that's the extra number I was talking about. They already have cards to get Ethiopia easily, so I don't want to make it a better, more stable country. This one lets them do some realignment rolls against places. Ooh, this is great. So the ideal thing you want to do in the game is play events that won't actually help your opponent when you play them. And when you play a card that matches your opponent, you can decide whether the event gets resolved first or the ops. That's what I'm going to do right now. Because this F5E's delivered event says the USSR may make 1 realignment roll against each country in Africa, which is pretty terrible. But guess what? Realignment is kind of like coupping, only allowable in countries that have your opponent's influence. So if I play this for the event, it'll literally do nothing for them, and I'll just get to use these 3 ops free and clear if I say the event happens first. So I'm doing that. And although there's a good chance they'll just take Ethiopia right back, it is the best place for me to coup right now, because I am going to do a coup. And so I played a 3 ops card, plus whatever I roll, versus their 1 doubled. I don't have the Nasserism plus to my die roll. And okay, I got a 4. That's pretty darn good. 4 plus 3 is 7. Minus 1 doubled is 5. Oh, so I'm going to wipe them out and put 3 in myself. Which gives me back control. And I get it was a 3 ops card, 3 military operations, which means no matter what, I should be safe on that front now. And I'm actually really hoping that I get a 1, 2, or scoring card here to lower DEFCON. Yes! Because now that it's a 2 DEFCON, they cannot coup right back in Ethiopia against me, because they'll never do that if there's a chance of them triggering nuclear war and losing the game automatically. So that was an awesome, awesome start. They are back to having no influence anywhere in all of Africa, and they can't coup anywhere at the moment because they can't coup in the Middle East, where I have influence in Saudi Arabia because of the DEFCON status, and they're too afraid to coup in Ethiopia. So they'll probably be, I don't know, I guess they'll have to be like placing influence kind of coming down from South Yemen, and I can try to block them off maybe. We'll see how it goes. So we're going into action round 2. Once again, we flip the top card, and because it is a USSR or mixed nationality card, it goes next in the card line. So they would prefer to play the Arab League for its event when it's applicable. Remember, they need to control 3 of these countries, and they definitely don't. And now we check what they're going to do. Once again, clearly the first one applies. They do not control a flashpoint country. They do not control 3 countries in Africa. Africa scoring is not in the discard pile. I'm actually kind of close to a potential auto win if I can go grab Somalia. So first we're going to check that new event and see if it removes U.S. control of a flashpoint country or changes control of sufficient countries to prevent a U.S. automatic victory. We don't have a U.S. automatic victory in the cards right now. We would have to be controlling Somalia. So all we're going to see is if the event would get rid of my influence in Ethiopia. And no, it just makes the USSR draw some cards and get some victory points, so they're going to ignore that for now. Although Cyrus Vance is a playable event if we get further down the priorities, they just don't want to do it right now because they're, again, really worried about the Africa instant loss. Or we ignore the coup if option because we know there are no places they can coup that might not end the game. That's why they have this little DEFCON question mark thing. Realignment, as I mentioned, can also get rid of influence in a country, but here they say they'll only do it if they have a +2 net modifier in their favor. Realignment modifiers work like this. You pick a country, just like coupping, it needs to have your opponent's influence. And here, let's actually show you Saudi Arabia, even though they couldn't do a realignment there because DEFCON is 3 or lower and it's in the Middle East. So each player rolls a die in realignment, and you get a +1 bonus if you have the most influence in the targeted country. So I would get +1 in Saudi Arabia, and you get +1 as well for each adjacent country you control. So they said the only way the USSR will use realignment here is if they have at least a +2 modifier overall. So like if they try to do realignment in Saudi Arabia, again, if DEFCON allowed it, which it doesn't, here they would have +1, +2, +3 for 3 adjacent controlled countries. I'd have +1 for having the most influence in the country, so that would be a +2 modifier overall. And how it works, again, this is just illustrative, is you both roll a die, and then you check the difference of whoever won. So here with a +2 modifier, they'd be 6 versus 3, so that's a 3 difference. And they remove up to that much influence from the area, but unlike a coup, they don't add their own as well. And realignments are also dangerous because if you roll badly and you have influence there, the other player removes your influence. Whereas, again, a coup can only remove your opponent's influence. All right, teaching mode deactivate. Let's get back to what they're doing. So yeah, long story short, they're not going to do any of these realign options right now because they don't have any good odds. They will not play the first available event in the line, Cyrus Vance. Instead, they're going to place influence. And this is what I figured they were going to do. It makes the most sense. So when you place influence, it has to be adjacent to existing influence on the board or in the same place. So they could like put more in South Yemen. So they are going to have to go through Djibouti to Somalia and just like try to get down as much as they can. So they're going to have to come from South Yemen through Djibouti, like I said. And the huge thing it's going to suck for them, because they'd really like to get some influence in Somalia, is that with a given place influence action, you can't chain it together. All the places you place influence in need to already have been adjacent to your own influence at the start of your action round. So they won't be able to get straight into Somalia here. Although, to be fair, neither can I. Even if I placed like a 3 ops card, I couldn't go to Kenya and then Somalia. So they're using the card that was flipped, 2 ops, although again, it stays in the card line to potentially be used as an event later. And I'm 900% sure they're going to go to Djibouti, but let's check. Maybe they'll go to Saudi Arabia? So we check the place influence, and we're looking at all the if-then statements for dots. Ooh, no USSR influence in Africa. So they are going to go to Africa. Okay, well that solves that one. So they're going to put their first placement in Djibouti. Now they have one more, and I do need to check the priority again because they might prefer to go to Saudi Arabia now. It costs, by the way, 1 operation point to go into a country where nobody controls it, but to go into a place where your opponent controls it costs 2. So like, for example, it would cost them 2 points to go into Ethiopia and put an influence there until they took away my control. But I don't control Saudi Arabia, so they could actually go in there. Let me see if that's what they prefer. So for their second placement, they do have influence in Africa, so they skip that. Spaces without USSR control, that applies to Djibouti and Saudi Arabia. If African scoring is not on the discard, a flashpoint country, but they can't reach Somalia, so that doesn't count. So next is a battleground country, so okay, they are going to go into Saudi Arabia, which makes some sense, I guess. They already have the 1 influence to go to Somalia where they actually care more to go. And if they can take control of Saudi Arabia, as long as they survive the first turn and the potential of Africa scoring, they're going to be in a good spot for Middle East control. So that's it for their second round. And again, Cyrus Vance stays in the card line. He's only going to go away if they actually use his event. All right, now I would kind of like to keep them out of Somalia, but I don't think I can do much about it. So instead, I'm going to do Hero of the Crossing for its 3 ops. Yes, it would let me discard a USSR card and retrieve a US card, but I only have 2 more USSR cards, and one of them can go to the space race, and you can also hold over 1 card into the next round, although that is a little bit dangerous. Yeah, I think I want the ops. I'll show you why in a second, you'll see. Because look how good this is. I can go into Kenya, gaining control of one of the 2 battleground countries in Africa, the other being Egypt. And speaking of Egypt, put 1 in Sudan, which was also next to Ethiopia, where I have influence, putting me directly in range of putting influence in Egypt. Now, I do also, this is the negative, I do open myself up to them coupping in Sudan, because they couldn't coup there if I don't have influence, but now they could. Actually, yeah, maybe I shouldn't go into Sudan now that I'm looking at it, because it's only got a 1 stability. They've still got Nasserism giving them +1s, and they can coup freely in a country like Sudan, because only battlegrounds and potentially flashpoint countries, if you flip the wrong card, can cause DEFCON to lower, and it's not in the Middle East, so they're not locked out of it because of DEFCON. So they could freely coup in Sudan and get way more influence in the spot. Yeah, okay, you know what? Hold on. Let's switch up a little bit. I'll just go into Kenya, because that's still going to give me access to Somalia, and they still can't coup there because it's a battleground country. And instead of playing the other card, I'm going to use the Ogaden War for 2 ops, specifically because, first of all, like I said, this is pretty much a long shot and almost never works. But also because the card that I previously played and gave them the event for specifically prevents the play of the Ogaden War for the rest of the game. So, yeah, I'm just going to use it for 2 ops. And again, place influence in Kenya, so now I control the only battleground country besides Egypt in the region. All right, now we're in action round 3, and okay, it's the Indian Ocean Zone of Peace again, which is only playable in action round 7 or 8, so they're not going to consider that one for a while. By the way, it scores 2 victory points and then makes it harder to do coup attempts. Basically, everything becomes a battleground, which would actually be nice here, because then I can go into Sudan with less fear. All right, and what are they doing? They're still super worried about Africa, and yeah, we know that that doesn't do anything. They can't coup. Yeah, because all I have is Kenya and Ethiopia, and either one could end the game. They don't have a good enough bonus to realign, so they're just going to place some more influence. 2 ops worth because of this card. And I'll start skipping through some of the priorities a bit, except when it's like a really interesting one that's more complicated. So yeah, the first one that applies, and you would kind of guess this from how the game plays, is Somalia. They're going to put both in here, which means now they control a flashpoint country. They have ensured that I cannot get the auto win, because that would have required controlling both flashpoint countries. And heck yes, I was definitely about to go in there with Kenya here if they had not done that. All right, now for my action phase, I could still really fight them on Somalia if I wanted to. I could also secure control of Saudi Arabia. All right, I still want to say Victorious Leader, although I could use it to put people in Saudi Arabia and some other places. I could use Separatists for its event in Somalia. Yeah, I kind of like that. Although, again, they're probably just going to boost up their people in there in a second anyway. But still, there's a better use of a 2 ops card than it would be otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and use this. Normally, to place influence in Somalia, I'd have to spend 2 ops for the first placement since they control it. Then they wouldn't be beating me by at least 2, and I could place a second one, so that would cost 3. But Separatist just makes me equal in a non-battleground country their influence, so I get 2 for free. Well, not for free, but a 2 ops card became basically a 3 ops card. Okay, so yep, we do not have control, either of us. Now, are they almost assuredly going to just place some more influence there? Sure, but it's cool to be present as well. And I don't know, this might be crazy, but if I can get influence in Sudan and Madagascar, giving me a really big bonus on realignment rolls, maybe I could try to realign in Somalia, take away their stuff, and just be in sole control. Although I'm not sure why I'm struggling so much for this, because I don't have the Africa card, and they're certainly not going to play it if they draw it, so it's not like this is actually going to happen. In fact, yeah, you know what? I know that. This is stupid. I'm not going to do that action at all. I think instead, might not be wise, but I'm going to look ahead to the future and play 3 ops, all to place influence in Saudi Arabia, which gets me fully in control because I have at least 3 influence, and I'm beating the USSR by at least 3. So now it'll cost more for them to go in there if they want to try. I really want to get to Egypt, but again, I know the second that I put down any influence in Sudan, they're going to coup me on the very next turn. That's just the smart thing to do. And it would just give them access to Egypt. So it's kind of like this, gave a chicken who's going to go for it first. All right, so now we're going here. The USSR does control a flashpoint country. So they stop worrying about us auto-winning in Africa. and they instead look for choke point influence. And again, a choke point is a country next to a battleground where I don't have influence yet. So exactly what I was just saying, if I was in Sudan, they'd be like, oh, no, 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 and they'd try to take it from me. But that does not apply right now. So is DEFCON 3, and there's isolated US influence. That means influence all by itself. DEFCON is not at 3. Next, they check, are there military operations less than DEFCON, and it's action round 6, 7, or with special event card 8. They have 2 military operations. I have 3. But DEFCON is at 2, so we're totally fine. You need at least 2 to not lose victory points, and we both have at least 2. So it looks like for a while, unless I go to Sudan or somewhere to mess with them, they're just going to do the no other condition applies, which means first they play the first playable card they can, and then if they don't do that, they place influence. And playable goes from left to right. We know they won't play Arab League unless they control the 3 countries, or they don't. Right, do they? No, they only control South Yemen and Somalia currently. Somalia's not on there, so nope. Okay, so next they're going to play Cyrus Vance. All right, and because they play this, it's removed from the game. And how the AI conducts the card is they randomly draw 2 cards. They'll discard Africa scoring if I had it. Otherwise, they'll discard the card with the highest operation value, but a USSR one if they can. Because the card says that if they discard a USSR associated card, they gain 2 victory points for USSR. And 2 victory points is nothing tiny, although it does help me a bit, and then they get rid of a bad card for me. All right, and they randomly got Separatists and the Oh, man, don't take away the... All right, so that sucks. They are discarding the Victorious Leader because it is the highest ops value. Neither of them was only USSR, so they couldn't get the victory points, but that kind of hurt more, really. All right, so that's it for their 4th action round, and now their card line's a little bit shorter. All right, so I've got 4 more plays, which means I need to play all these cards. I'm realizing the Derg is actually not too bad, especially if I play it like near the end of a turn, because it adds 2 USSR influence in Ethiopia, which would still leave me in control of Ethiopia, although it would suck to give them access to that whole area. Soviets airlift Cubans removes all of my influence from a country in Africa. That's horrific. I'm going to do the space race. Use this card. Remember, you can play 1 card per turn of either side without resolving the event for the space race. So I'm certainly using that for the space race. Separatists I can play. US aid I can play. I want to hold on to Romanian autonomy if I can. So yeah, what I'm thinking is I'll space race that at some point, play these for ops, or maybe for an event if something weird happens, and then I think play that like at the very end of the turn and give them some influence in Ethiopia and just kind of deal with it. But yeah, gosh, man, losing Victorious Leader, that is such a bummer. Or you know what, at the moment there's no like must-do terrible things on the horizon, so I'm going to go and discard Soviets airlift Cubans for the space race. Let me show you how that works. So you look at the next spot up, which in my case says it's 2 ops. You need to discard at least a 2 ops card. Mine was a 3 ops. And then you roll, and if you get a 1 to 3, you get to move your thing up. And here, the first person to get here gets 2 victory points. The second person to get here gets 1. If I don't roll a 1 to 3, I waste the action, but I got rid of a bad card, so it's fine. All right, so hopefully... Okay, no. That's too bad. But hey, that nasty card is gone. By the way, the USSR will automatically move up when it's the solo mode at the end of each round. So they will get here at the end of the game. If I can't get there first, that's pretty negative. And also because they're here, once both people have reached this spot, neither gets this remove influence ability. So that was a one-time thing for me pretty much. All right, there's 3 rounds left and the Dhofar Rebellion. So nothing has changed. We know they're going straight to playable events. An Indian Zone of Peace, they'll only play in action round 7 or 8, which means they have the end of the round. So they won't play that now because it's action round 5. But they can play this. If the USSR controls South Yemen, they do. They get 1 influence in Oman and 1 other country in the Middle East. And this is a pretty devastating card because, yeah, Oman, who cares? But guess where else they get to jump straight to with no adjacency? Yep, because the priorities will first say they want to go to a battleground country, and then they want to go to the one that is cheaper for them to gain control of. In Saudi Arabia, they'd have to do a bunch to beat me by 3, but in Egypt, there's nothing stopping them. All right, so that was not my favorite. Darn it. And yeah, I was thinking I could use Separatists to get in there too, but it has to be specifically a non-battleground country. I guess I'll just use US aid for the ops. Again, I'm waiting on the Derg, and then Separatists might be useful somewhere. And maybe, yeah, you know, I could take a chance and do realignment rolls. So realignment, I didn't mention when I was describing it before. It's different than a coup in that your 2 ops is not a bonus to your roll, but instead that's how many places you can realign. You can even realign in the same place multiple times. So like I could realign to get them out of South Yemen. Maybe I should have already done that because I forgot that that one event was out there. I would have +1 for having control adjacent. They would have +1 for having the most influence there. So it would just be a straight up roll. But if I rolled higher than them, I would get to wipe them out there, and I could have 2 chances. Or if I succeed in one, I could try for Somalia, which is also just a straight up roll. So yeah, let's try it. Let's try to get them out of Somalia first. So I just need to roll higher than, yeah, there we go. So that wipes them out of Somalia, cool. And then for my second one, let's push my luck. Let's go for South Yemen. I mean, I could actually just try, ooh, should I try for Egypt? They have a +1 bonus, but if I roll as well as I just did, so I'd have to beat them by 2 to wipe them out, but then they would not be in there. I think it's worth it. You know, actually, I probably should have done both rolls in Egypt. Yeah, okay, that's a failure. But still, I did get them out of Somalia. They're probably going to go right back there, though, because they're still in Djibouti. Darn it. Man, I should have done the Egypt roll first. That would have been so good. All right, we go to round 6, and actually they are going to change things up again because they no longer control a flashpoint country, so I think they're just going to go right back. Do have to flip a new card, though. U.S. presidential elections. This can be played during the headline phase to cancel my headline, so it's just a one-ops. That seems fine. They're not going to play any events because they won't get rid of anything. They can't coup in Somalia. They can't realign. So they're just going to place influence in Somalia for 1. Oh, wait. I was getting lucky here with a single op, but it says you have to check this. Revealed during USSR action round, shuffle back into the draw deck. So they want it to be like available as a possible thing during the headline phase. It's a bummer. So instead, they got famine. And again, with the things we were seeing, we're going to go into placing influence. Oh, crud. You know what I just realized? I cannot do a realignment roll in Egypt because it's the Middle East and DEFCON is 3 or lower. So let's say that other roll was Djibouti and that I failed. Anyway, 2 ops, and yeah, clearly they're going right back to Somalia, so that was just a kind of nothing, wasn't it? All right, I could use Separatists to try to realign again. I could do 2 rolls in Somalia, or I could just put 2 guys there. It's kind of equivalent unless I get lucky, and then I could maybe go into Djibouti as well. And that would take away their ability to get back in Somalia. Sure, I'll go for the realignment rolls. All right, so Somalia, first time. We're tied, because, yeah, so I get rid of 1. All right. Well, now suddenly doesn't seem as useful. But I'll go ahead and go for it anyway. Somalia again. And, oh, okay, beautiful. I mean, again, it's not really that different from other things I could have done, but at least it'll waste their time a bit. And we go into the final action round of the turn. Oh, and they got can't be an event, so it's going to get discarded, but they're going to use the 2 ops if they don't play an event for something else. And yeah, when we go down everything, they just want to get Somalia back because they're really scared of that Africa scoring card that I never had. All right, so for my last card, I do think I want to keep Romanian autonomy. It's a 3 operations if they have more victory points than me. But again, it's worth a victory point at the end of the game, and I don't want to give that to them. So I'm going to play the Derg, and I'll resolve the event first for them again. So they get 2 influence in Ethiopia, and then if Ethiopia is USSR controlled, its stability number becomes 3. But in this case, I have 3 influence in Ethiopia, so I'm still in control because I'm beating them by at least 1 equal to the stability. The stability does not change for the card. So, yeah, you know, it's fine. But then I do get 2 ops. Part of me thinks I should maybe, I don't know, like go into Yemen. I could control it and make it really tough for them to do much. I know South Yemen's not as dangerous anymore since they already got their 1 event for it. Because DEFCON does improve by 1 at the start of each turn, but it would still be 3 or lower, so they still could not realign or coup here, so it wouldn't really be very dangerous. So sure, let's switch my focus a bit and grab this for myself before they try to. So now I have more control in the Middle East than they do in case that scoring card comes up. All right, and that's the end of the first turn. We check military operations. We each have at least 2, which is the current DEFCON, so no negative victory points. Nothing is scored yet. You have automatic scoring at the end of the game, but otherwise you're waiting for the scoring cards. And then just in the solo mode, the USSR automatically advances on the space race, which means I will not get to remove 1 influence automatically during the headline phase. I still want to try to get here first next turn to get 2 victory points and deny them the bigger bonus for moving up there first. So all right, we're going back to round 1. We're going to the next turn. DEFCON increases by 1. Nasserism is over with. And importantly, at least as far as I can tell in the rules, these cards still stay here, so they are still threatening you. So good to know. And then I take all the mid-war cards that are left, so not all the ones that were discarded or removed from the game, but all the ones that are left. And I shuffle in the late war cards, which now does include the Middle East scoring card. So the Africa scoring card might never come out if it's in here and doesn't get drawn. We'll see. And as we go into the headline phase, oh my gosh. All right, I got U.S. presidential elections. That's just a 1-ops card, but it's also not a bad event. Like, it doesn't do anything after the headline phase, so that I can play freely. Cento collapse, only a 1-ops. Remove a total of 2 U.S. influence from the Middle East. That's not great. God, all these 1-ops. This is not good, y'all. Détente will steal the Romanian autonomy card from me. Ooh, so what I can do is if I use this early, it also subtracts 2 from my military operations. So if I use this early and before I've cooed it all, that would actually be a dead card. So that's at least something I can do. This one is horrific. I got to space race this, I think. Degrade DEFCON level by 1. And if I'm the one who plays this, even though it's a Russian event, if it's on my turn that it's played, I still lose. Remove all U.S. influence in 2 countries of the USSR has influence, which currently would be like they would pick Ethiopia and Saudi Arabia. No. As good as 4 ops are. No, thank you. Okay, yeah. This is not a great hand, y'all. I do have Middle East scoring, but I'm not feeling very positive about my chances. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, though, for my headline event. Kenya joins Rapid Deployment Force. I'll get 1 influence in Kenya. That I already control, so that part doesn't matter much. But remove 1 USSR influence in a non-USSR controlled country. That can get them out of Egypt, which I think is probably the best thing for me to do here. So I'll pick this, and let's see what they go for. Can they play this? Yes. Play both with at least 3 USSR influence in any country not needed to maintain USSR control or prevent US control. Oh, because it lets them reallocate stuff. So basically, extra influence, but it needs to be at least 3. They have 2 influence that's not directly doing anything right now in Ethiopia, and 1 in Saudi Arabia, but it has to be a single country, so no, this is not playable. All right, I flipped through like 6 more cards, and I finally got one. I think it's another really good one. All operations cards played by the USSR for the remainder of this turn. Oh my god. Receive +1 operations to a maximum of 3. Gosh, y'all, I got like these crazy headlines that are like perfect rest of the turn boost for them. Okay, so they would only play this in the headline or action round 1. This is terrible. Okay, so that's happening. They have +1 to all their operations, but if it's a 3 or a 4, they don't get an additional +1. All right, then my headline resolves. I get an influence in Kenya and remove 1 in a non-USSR controlled country. So Kenya goes to 3, which is, cool. And then big one, get the heck out of Egypt. So now they'll have to make the long trudge and give me the chance to coup them instead of them cooing me. So that was good. And speaking of cooing, with DEFCON back to 3, I foresee a coup in Ethiopia in like 5 seconds. Let's see if that happens. Because we're going to the events of 86. Okay, so that's a card for me, which means that they can only do the ops. Although they can still resolve events in their line if that's what ends up being picked. And this time, the first one that applies is DEFCON is 3, and there's isolated. Oh, actually, no, never mind. None of my influence is isolated. Isolated influence means I don't have influence in an adjacent country. So, like, if I didn't have influence in Kenya, them getting me out of Ethiopia would be even more devastating because I couldn't just come right back in. And we're skipping this one because it's not actually around 6, 7, or 8. So, wow, they're actually just playing the first playable event. But Arab League, they don't control enough countries. Indian Zone of Peace, they only will do in round 7. So they get 2 ops, but horrifically, it's actually 3 ops because of their stupid tank card. And they're placing influence with it. And because Africa's scoring is not in the discard pile still, the first thing they're going to care about is flashpoints. So they're going to spend 2 because I control Ethiopia to tie me with 3. And then 1 more since I'm not in control anymore to get to 4. So now, if Africa's scoring came out for them, they'd get an immediate victory. They control Ethiopia and Somalia and more countries in Africa. I control 1, they control 2. Which I think, this might be dangerous, but let's try it. I think it means I want to play Eritrean Popular Liberation Front as an event. I mean, it's only a 1. I get to put 1 influence in Ethiopia. Oh, I get a victory point. So for the first time somebody's on the board. This is a zero-sum thing. So like now if they gain 2 victory points, first they would take away my 1 and then get their own. And then if I got 3 victory points, first I'd take away their 1 and then get 2. So only 1 person will like have victory points at a time. And I'm adding influence in Ethiopia and an adjacent country. And I'm kind of terrified to do this, but I'm going to try controlling Sudan and see if maybe like them being distracted by Ethiopia will give me a chance to jump into Egypt. Because if I have Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Kenya, I'll have every battleground on the map, and even my terrible hand would not be so bad then. But yeah, there's a really high chance they're going to coup here, and they would just have to roll absolutely horrible to not take control. And they flip Voice of America and Amharic. Okay, it's only 2 ops, and they can't do the event, which might be good for me. Although, yeah, here's all the cool cards that I wanted to get. But man, I don't think they're going to let me get away with it. Because look, they don't care about that because they have a flashpoint country. They see that I have choke point influence. They see me in Sudan. So the first one doesn't apply. Yeah, I think, would a 2 + 2 be enough? Oh, that's right, it would be a 3 because of their stupid Kalashnikov's T62 card. See, there's a reason I didn't do this. I knew it was being dumb. Oh, but they only got a 1. It's still got to be enough, right? 1 + 3 from their modifier. Before -2 is 2, yeah, so they're still going to be in there. But they're weak enough. If I coup and roll better than them, then maybe I could get a lot of people there, then maybe they would not be able to coup me back out. By the way, they got 3 military operations from that, so more than enough, I'm sure. All right. It's only a 2 instead of a 3, but I think I'm going to use Romanian autonomy to set up me being able to somewhat safely use détente. Somewhat safely, I guess. Yeah, okay, so I'm giving it to them. It goes face down, so they couldn't use it this turn, but again, they're just going to get it. It's 1 victory point for them, so that's a big swing. But I'm going to do a 2 ops in Sudan and hope that with the coup I get like a 5 or something. Yeah, I don't know, y'all. I'm kind of grasping at straws right now. Just, okay, geez. Yes, what is that? 6 plus a 2 ops. -2, 6. Okay, so I'm getting 5 there. I just like Sudan so much. Man, that might be enough that they won't even try for the coup, and then I can get into Egypt. Okay. Although, crud, they could still get the auto victory. No, because they have to control more in Africa than I do. So I actually might not care if they have Somalia and Ethiopia. If I can get Kenya and Egypt, oh, this is great. Well, I shouldn't say it's great. I should say it's kind of great because my cards are still trash. But I can get the Middle East scoring soon. Okay, anyway, going into their third action round. And there are all my cards. Okay, now are they going to shuffle this one back in? No, never mind. They don't have any rules to shuffle my cards back in. So good. It's only going to be, well, a 2 ops for them. 2 ops is still pretty good. All right, so I have choke point influence. But a 2 result would not do it, so they won't even try to coup. Will they realign? They have +1. No. It's a tied modifier because they have 1 control adjacent. Okay, so DEFCON is 3. And is there isolated U.S. influence? No. Military operations, they're fine on. So they're just going to play the first playable event, which is none. So it's going to place 2 influence with their bonus. God, that card is ridiculous. All right, and the first one is indeed a flashpoint country. Although, again, I don't know if they should care about it. Because, yeah, more African countries controlled. And we're tied right now, and if I get Egypt, I'll be ahead. So that's their first placement, because that gets them control. Oh, now this one is interesting. Their next thing they would have wanted to do is like a battleground, but they would need 2 to get in here because I control it. So then it actually comes down to Djibouti and Oman, because either one they could gain control with one. And there's no other divider here, so I'm just going to do this randomly. This actually, compared to a lot of like war game bots, happens very infrequently. Like coin, you're rolling for random spaces almost every turn. So yeah, we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And okay, they have taken Oman, which I like way better because if they had taken Djibouti, they would have been, again, threatening the instant Africa win for having more controlled African countries. As it is, though, they've tied me up for Middle East control, but if I can get Egypt, which I should be able to this turn, right? Oh god, it's harder than I thought. I forgot how terrible my values are. Okay, just because I want to go in there and grab it all at once and really lock things down, then I can play like Middle East scoring next turn. I'm going to do Diego Garcia. It's actually a pretty good... I haven't talked about strategic sea lanes at all. You can place influence here as well. You need to have 4 more than the opponent and at least 4 to control it. But what it does is when you score places, which I'll eventually show you how that works, if you don't control it but you have more influence there, you get +1 victory point. And if you do control it, you double your victory points from scoring, which is absurd. And then also at the very end of the game in final scoring, it's worth, I think, 2 victory points for control or 1 for having more influence. And Diego Garcia would get me 2 influence and take away 1 from them, although with it being a 2 ops card, I could just put 2 there. But yes, I'm going to use that for 2 ops. And seize control of Egypt, y'all. That's awesome. Because they can't coup there. Cooing is still 3, although they could... Oh, I could coup in like Somalia, I just realized, or Ethiopia. But I don't really care as much, because Africa scoring is not worrying me right now. But yeah, barring a wild event, there's like no way they're getting in here. Egypt is locked. Because they can't coup there, since it's a 3 or less. They don't have any adjacency. Even if they took out Sudan now, it wouldn't matter. So I'm actually feeling good with all my terrible cards. Oh, they've got a 3. Let's see what they want to do. Yeah, and first thing that applies, all this does not, so it's just a playable event. Let's see if this new one is. Oh, there's another one that they're going to shuffle back in. Never mind. Instead, stagflation. Oh, they're probably going to play this and mess up my scoring card? Yeah, it just says yes. There's no extra instructions. So they're playing it. So what's this do? The U.S. must reveal any scoring card in the U.S. hand. The USSR may then conduct operations using this card's operation value. Wow. If the U.S. revealed a scoring card, it must be played on... Oh, I was going to play it anyways. I don't care much about that. But it is removed from the game. Cool. Now this, I might be wrong. All operations card played by the USSR for the remainder of this turn receive +1 of their operations value. But this is played as an event. I feel like they wouldn't get the +1. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that, but I feel like it's different because it was played as an event, but then it's letting them do it. It wasn't played for its operations. I'm probably wrong there, but I'm just going to give them 2 ops, and I have to play Middle East scoring next turn. Right, for the 2 ops, they're going to get Djibouti first, and now they control that, and we're tied in Africa. And then if I'm right, it's only 1 point. I might not be. The only place they can go is Madagascar, but that would get them more control in Africa if I let them have it. And my turn, no choice. I'm going to play a scoring card, so let's show you how it works. So each player gets things based on a few things. So first, presence. You have presence in a region if you control at least one country there. So we both have at least presence. You have domination if you control more countries overall, which I do, 1, 2, 3 versus 2. And if you control at least one battleground and one non-battleground. So yes, I have Saudi Arabia and Yemen and also Egypt. And then here's the big one. You have control if you control more countries and if you control every battleground, which I do. And then you also get +1 victory point for each battleground. So long story short, I'm getting 7, 8, 9, and they have presence. They're getting 3, and you score the difference. So I get 6 more victory points. That's great. So that gets me to 7. 10's an instant win. So that was pretty great. All right, but now we're back to the USSR. They have 3 turns to try to make this Africa thing work. Or they're getting another 3 ops card. God, their ops are so high, though. And once again, just for a while, like none of these are going to apply because they are fine. They're not worried about the Africa scoring card. I don't have choke point influence. I don't have any isolated influence, and it's not round 6, 7, or 8, and already their military operations are fine. So they're just going to keep on doing event and influence. And here, again, the events don't apply because they'll only play this at the very end for the victory points. So they're just placing 3 influence. Just kind of walk through it again. So looking for places without USSR control. Flashpoint countries first, because Africa's not in the discard, but they already have those. Battlegrounds. Okay, so this time they're going to try to get a battleground. Which one do they want? Least operation needed to add USSR control. So it's between Kenya and Saudi Arabia. It would cost them 2 to go into Kenya, because I control it. 2 again to get control away from me. So that'd be 4. And then to beat me by 2 more would be another 3. No, it'd be another 4. So that's 8. I'm sure it's going to be Saudi Arabia then. It would cost 2 to go in and take away my control, and then 5 more. Yep, so they're going to go into Saudi Arabia. So, okay, they are going to steal control of it. Or sorry, not steal control, but cancel my control, because they spend 2 for their first influence, 1 for their second once control is gone. So yeah, we are no longer in control of that. But we just got the Middle East scoring card, so man, I am happy about how the timing of that worked out. By the way, there was a 3 ops card on its own, so the Kalashnikov's T-62 thing does not apply. All right, I have to play 3 more of these cards. Big I haven't talked about, but it's awesome. It lets you make a coup attempt with 3 operations that does not affect the DEFCON track and isn't affected by the limitations on like coupping in the Middle East and such. So I could, for example, kick them out of Saudi Arabia there. Although, of course, Saudi Arabia's stability is really good. I can play U.S. presidential elections safely. So like that's 2 out of the 3. And then I can use one of these for the space race. So that'll cover me for all the things I need to do. So I don't ever have to play these terrible ones. So, what should I do first? The terrible thing is that these ops values are horrifically bad. I think I'm just going to use this for 1-ups. And again, this event only applies during the headline, so it won't hurt me at all. I could do a 1-ups coup. Could coup in Ethiopia. That would at least, like, annoy them, right? Because they know that the African scoring card is not out still. Because with the +1, I'm only having to beat a 2. It's a pretty good chance I'd at least, mess him around a bit. So let's try it out. We're queuing for 1-ups in Ethiopia. 1 + 4 is 5, -2 is 3, so they lose 3 influence, which gets me back in control. I don't care a ton, but it's a distraction for them, is basically what I'm thinking. Oh, and I gotta draw to see if DEFCON goes down. Ha 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 ha. This is like the worst card. It lets the USSR just like steal Ethiopia so easily. But when it's discarded to check for DEFCON, it just lowers DEFCON, nothing else happens. Which also means they can't coup in Ethiopia anymore, which is cool. But I can still use Big to coup wherever I want, so that's great. All right, now they're 6. Okay, it's another going to be 2 + 1, 3 ops. Yes, it kind of works like a charm because they should be trying to get Saudi Arabia, but their first priority is still Flashpoint because that Africa scoring card has still never come out, which I would say is maybe they're a little dumb in this case, but that's okay. So they have to spend 2 to get themselves to 3 influence, which is still not enough to take away my control. And then for their last point, I think now they'd go to Saudi Arabia, right? Which gets them to 4. Okay. This is my second to last turn. You know what, as awesome as this guy is for cooing, I think I just want the 3 ops to get me back in control of Saudi Arabia. Because I think with them only having 1 turn left and still focusing on Ethiopia, even though that's not very smart, I think that's what they're going to do. And that shouldn't leave them, hopefully, with enough to also take away my control in Saudi Arabia. We'll see. All right, we're going to the final action round of the game. What do they got? Okay, just a 2. Oh, wait, this is one of those ones that gets shuffled back in. I don't want them to get something crazy like a 4. Oh, my gosh. Okay, what's this going to do? So it's a 4. Ops. Although, wait, they might play the Indian thing for victory points. Let's see. So they definitely control flashpoints. They're fine there. I don't have choke point influence. DEFCON is not 3. They have enough military. So yeah, first thing you want to do is play a playable event. So they're actually not going to do the 4 ops. They're going to use Arab League. They can't do. Oh wait, can they? Crap, I haven't checked this in a while. Egypt, no. Sudan, no. South Yemen, yes. Oman, yes. No, okay. So they have 2 out of 3. So instead, they're going to play Indian Ocean Zone of Peace to score 2 victory points. They only play this in the 7th or 8th round. Okay, this is great. Thank you. Yeah, so 2 victory points, but they are leaving me Saudi Arabia. I'm cool with that. And then for my last turn, I'm going to play Mr. Niet to try to roll for the space racetrack. So I need a 1 through 3. Oh, I got it. Awesome. So that goes up, and I scored 2 victory points for being the first one there. Okay, this is going to be a blowout, I think. But it's just because I got stupidly lucky with the Sudan-Egypt thing, really, is what did it. And then, yeah, they do seem... I'll say they seem to slightly hyper-focus on the flashpoint countries. Because the AI and their placement priorities wants to get into both of them, when really, if they could check and see that they can't possibly win Africa, they probably should focus elsewhere once they know they have one locked down so that the US can't get an instant win. But yeah, I mean, the African scoring card never came out, so it didn't matter at all. All right, at the end of the turn, they still advance. They get 1 victory point there. And then we do final scoring of each region. So, this is not going to be good. I still have control versus them only having presence in the Middle East. So that's another 6-point swing. So I'm at 12. And how are we looking in Africa? 1, 2, 3, 4 control versus, oh my gosh. So once again, it's control versus presence. And I have +2 for both battlegrounds. So that's 6 versus 1. Is that 5 more? Okay, so 17. But then they have Romanian autonomy, so that goes down to 16. All right, so again, lots of luck in there, though. That's some good luck, too. There are several ways to make the AI harder if you want to, like, raise up the difficulty. But definitely my last 2 games did not go this well, so I'm not saying you need to do that right away. But yeah, I might in the future house rule it that they're a little bit smarter, because they say you can do this. Like, they say that you can, make better decisions for the AI. I might house rule it so that they're a little bit smarter with the flashpoints and they don't prioritize them so much. Because yeah, like if they took out Saudi Arabia and Kenya, which they probably could have done with some more of those operations, then clearly it would have been very tough for me to get all those points I just did. All right, so what do I think of Twilight Struggle Red Sea? I'll say that I have not played the original Twilight Struggle for 10 years, but I always liked the core kind of card play of, do I use my opponent's event? When do the ops matter? Can I play this in such a way that it minimizes the damage to me? I like the variety in how the cards come out. Now that I've played so many coins after Twilight Struggle, I might like the way that card-driven system works a little bit better, but I still think this is great. And I think the way that it works in the solo mode is pretty good. The one negative is that it is swingier, I think. Because how it's supposed to sort of naturally work in Twilight Struggle is if I draw a ton of USSR cards when I'm the US, then that means that they are, by extension, probably going to draw a ton of US cards, and it'll kind of balance things out. But with the AI ignoring cards that they play for the other side and you never getting your events from them, it does simplify things, of course. I'm not saying I wish that they had put that in, but I think it does make it a little bit swingier because, it's not really hurting them to get cards while it is hurting you to get these. Although it does hurt them some because then these won't go to their card line and they won't have as many cool events to play. But it does mean they're kind of more ops rich and you are more events poor than in a regular game with a solo. But it doesn't change the fact that this remains an awesome card-driven system with lots of interesting choices. And the board play is also really cool. Now, I do feel like, even though I've only played this about 5 times, I do feel like there are some openings and obvious things. I probably should never have gone to Sudan. I got stupidly lucky. I really opened up Egypt for them. But yeah, there are certain things that you're almost never going to do that you are going to do as you learn the cards. It's going to kind of push you in certain directions. But even that is cool because it gives the game more depth, more replay and kind of feeling of mastery over it. But at the same time, there's enough variety in how the dice roll and how the cards come out and you not knowing which cards your opponent has or not and waiting for certain cards to not be a danger anymore, that I think this is a game that will reward you for going deeper and deeper. Now, clearly, the original Twilight Struggle is way longer, but hey, I kind of like that you can play this one in maybe half an hour 2-player and probably an hour for solo. It certainly still takes me a while to track down what action they're going to take each time. So this, for my taste currently, where I like quicker games, is awesome. And if you get the original Twilight Struggle, you can bring in some cards and make it a 3-turn game just to make it a little bit more epic. But yeah, I think 2 turns is cool. God, seeing how long 2 turns takes here reminds me why I stopped playing Twilight Struggle with 10 turns, because that's a lot. Now, not everyone's going to like having to deal with all the cards and read all of that. Not everyone's going to like the idea that you can kind of learn the moves and learn the cards, and that a newer player will be at a big disadvantage to a stronger player. But for solo, you don't have to worry about any of that. That's only really a competitive concern. And also, you might not like the back and forth, like you kind of saw with Somalia, how I went in, they went in, and I went in, and they went in. They took out my stuff, and I took out their stuff. There certainly is a potential for kind of a back and forth fight over regions, but it usually doesn't last too long. Usually, someone's going to break the stalemate and pull ahead in some way. So I still find like all this board play and influence exciting. And just to talk briefly about this, there are a few things that are still kind of confusing. It's not like 100% smart, unless I was playing things wrong. I think, again, the way that they do flashpoints is like a little bit weird. And certainly for somebody who's never done a more complicated, like flowchart-based bot, this might seem scary. But honestly, if you have some experience with these or want to make this one your first one, this is way simpler and way more straightforward than like a lot of the solo coin bots I've played and stuff. Because this is pretty much it. I mean, it's a little bit annoying to have to look at the individual events and check their individual rules, but because it's such a small game, because the deck is so small, it's great that you can, very quickly for either side see what special things apply. It doesn't take that long to figure out which action they're doing. It doesn't take that long to figure out where they're doing it. So yeah, I think this is a pretty smooth playing bot for a war game. If you're coming from playing some simple solo co-op games and you want to jump into this, it's going to seem like a lot. But yes, I think relatively it's pretty cool. And I guess I should mention the dice. I got super lucky here with some dice. I could have gotten super unlucky and lost the game, but really that was my choice. I shouldn't have gone for some of those rolls, and it just happened to work out. But yeah, I don't mind the dice. Some people are going to. I think it adds again to the replay and the tension. If there weren't any dice, and it was just the luck of which cards came out, I think the game would be too static and too repetitive. So you really need this element, but not everyone's going to love it. Okay, so that was Twilight Struggle Red Sea. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.